Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's author reading with myself and PD Mac. We're finishing up the final two chapters of Throne of Deceit, and then we'll be doing book two next. So we're just going to jump right in and pick up where we left off. Chapter 19, Gwen. Something inside Gwen snapped. She felt the pulse of the magic and threw herself fully into it. Power coursed through every inch of her, welling internally with nowhere to go. Gwen screamed in pain and fell to her knees. Her flesh burned and sweat collected on her forehead. She recalled the name of the lightning rune and said, Tintreach. A jagged bolt of lightning arced from her hand, snaking its way through the dark sky and striking the soldiers atop the outpost. Her dying screams were like fuel to the fire burning within her. She spoke the rune again and again, blasting the front of the fortress until the stones cracked and sent fragments airborne. People escaped the building, running and ducking for cover. Gwen didn't know if they were friend or foe, and she didn't care either. She just kept hurling lightning at the outpost as she slowly rose back to her feet. Tobias hadn't moved yet. In any other circumstance, Gwen would have panicked. In her current state, her sole focus was on the power flowing through her. She was like a conduit, allowing the raw force of nature to channel through her body. Gwen saw a flash, and a sphere of steadily glowing light formed around a group of people exiting the outpost. Emil was shielding them from the lightning. One of Gwen's bolts struck the shield and bounced off, ricocheting into the doorway of the outpost. The stones of the upper portion gave way and the entrance caved in. Destruction was everywhere, but Gwen wasn't satisfied. She stalked forward and stood guard over Tobias as she blasted away at the outpost. The people who had fled were no longer in the way, and she unleashed even more rage. The magic was taking every ounce of strength she had. She was aware that she had lost control. That meant nothing to her. Someone was shouting her name, but she ignored their calls. Gwen's legs trembled and her focus was fading. Darkness was creeping toward her, bidding her to enter its embrace. She wanted to slip into the darkness, to lose herself completely and never feel pain anymore. But it was a lie. The darkness didn't want to comfort her. It wanted to suffocate her. Gwen pushed the exhaustion away and regained control, and cut ties with her connection to the magic. Her strength was gone, and she collapsed beside Tobias. She wanted to check his wound, but she couldn't move, and her eyes wouldn't focus. They were dry, and her eyelids were heavy. Gwen recalled his name, but she couldn't hear her own voice over the ringing in her ears. Her struggle to keep the darkness at bay became a losing battle. She closed her eyes and sailed away into oblivion. When Gwen awoke, light was shining through the fabric of her tent. She was on her side and laid there for a long while, trying to remember where she was and how she had gotten there. Her memories were disjointed, and the pounding in her skull didn't help. A shuffling noise at her side startled her. She rolled over to see Emil sitting cross-legged. You're alive, Emil said. Gwen couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic or not. Should I be dead? Her voice was coarse and sounded like someone else's. With what I saw last night, surprised you aren't. You lost control over the magic and you nearly killed innocent people. I warned you about losing control. I don't remember much, Gwen said guiltily. What happened? Emil picked up a wooden bowl and handed it to Gwen. It contained water, and Gwen sat up to drink from it. The liquid was cool and eased the ache in her throat, but the movement increased the pounding in her head. You demolished the outpost, Emil said, and a lot of other things. It's a good thing you went unconscious. You might have died otherwise. What about the prisoners? Are they safe? A lot of them were already dead or dying. We didn't save many of them, but this wasn't just about them. This was a message to Torian. The people have had enough, and are going to fight back. We slaughtered all but 2 soldiers. Why? Gwen wanted them all dead. If there was no one to run to the king and tell him what happened, then what good would ransacking the outpost have done? They serve as our messengers. Gwen drank the rest of the water and laid back down. Her headache eased a bit, but not much. I feel like my head is going to split open, she complained. Accept it as a lesson learned, Emil said. Never use magic when your emotions are in turmoil. I don't plan to do that again. Good. Emil stood and pushed the tent flaps open, then paused and looked back at Gwen. Despite our victories, we lost many. Roland has the others packing up, but you should stay in here and get some rest. I'll come back when they get ready to break down the tent. Emil left, and Gwen stared up at the tent ceiling. She remembered vividly that her father had died, but everything else was a blur. Her eyes welled with tears. She didn't think their outcome was much of a victory, and then she remembered what Boris had told her, that he wasn't her father. Eridor and Tobias had been right. Tobias. Gwen sat up too quickly and immediately regretted it. The world spun around her and she became disoriented, but she managed to crawl outside of the tent before she retched. The dizziness faded, and Gwen found enough strength to stand and survey the area. Roughly half of the camp had been broken down already, and the rebellion members had commandeered 2 wagons that had been outside the outpost stable. One of them was filled with bodies. Gwen shuffled toward it, but was intercepted by Roland. "You shouldn't be moving around," he said. His tone was authoritative. The look on his face was one of concern. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a boulder." "Would you like me to help you back to your tent?" "No, I can manage," Gwen replied. "Where's Tobias?" It was only there for a brief moment. The pained expression that crossed over his face said everything. Gwen's legs gave out and she crumpled to the ground. She wanted to cry out, but no tears flowed. Roland knelt and picked her up and carried her back to her tent. He set her down gently and heaved a sigh. "I'm sorry. I know Tobias was your friend. He was mine, too. The world has lost a good man. We're taking our fallen with us to ensure they receive a proper burial." He paused. "If you need anything, let me know." Roland left her alone. She didn't want to believe that Tobias was dead. As the realization set in, she blamed herself. If she hadn't been so insistent on rescuing her father, then he'd still be alive. This time the tears did come. She had failed to save her father. Tobias was dead. What did she have now? When Emil eventually returned, Gwen had barely moved. She hadn't slept either, but merely stared off at nothing. "It's time," Emil said. Gwen got up and followed her in silence. They left the tent, and Emil made Gwen grab some bread and an apple, then watched her eat it. "Loss is never easy," Emil said, climbing onto a large black horse. Gwen mounted the horse beside her, a small, speckled gelding. The animal was docile and began a steady trot at Gwen's flick of the reins. The two rode together without speaking, leaving the others behind. Gwen wondered why they were leaving without them, but assumed they would catch up. The silence became too much, and Gwen said, "I feel like it's my fault." "That's a natural response," Emil said, "but you were not to blame. Tobias would have gone to the outpost and fought whether you were involved or not." "I don't think so. If my father hadn't been taken, Tobias wouldn't have any reason to be there. Whether it was this outpost or another, this battle was going to happen regardless. Trust me, there's nothing to gain by blaming yourself. It won't bring the dead back, and it won't make you feel any better." Emil spoke so matter-of-factly that Gwen decided it was impossible to argue with the woman. She considered Boris's last words again. If he wasn't her father, who was? And who is her mother? "You said before there was a place where a mage could learn their true name," Gwen said. "Have you been there before?" "Yes, a few times. Why do you ask?" "I need to know who I really am," Gwen replied. "My father confirmed what Eridor told me, but he died before he could say who brought me to him. There's a mage I know in Steepcross who could give you a rune. She's a little eccentric, but she's harmless. She has many runes you could choose from." "As many as you?" "No," Emil replied. "There are a few like me. At least, I've only encountered a few. There may be others, but I have only traveled among the human kingdoms." "I've never traveled anywhere," Gwen said. "Is the trip dangerous?" Emil turned to look at her. "There is little danger, but it's a long journey. On a quick horse with minimal stops, it could take a few days. The place is on the border of Steepcross and Audible, the Elven Kingdom." "I want to go," Gwen said. "Will you come with me?" "I think I can do that," Emil said, offering a smile. "Who knows? Maybe I'll find another rune while we're there." The two stopped to rest and stretch their legs, allowing the horses to graze near a stream. The rest of the rebellion members caught up to them, and they traveled as a group back to the city of Penshaw. Gwen decided not to think about the horrible events of the night before, turning her thoughts instead to the future. When they reached Penshaw, Gwen and Emil returned to Eridor's tower. Emil relayed the events to Eridor while Gwen sat quietly. Although they had just arrived, Gwen was ready to go. She wanted to find out who her real parents were and why they had left her to be cared for by someone else. This minor victory came with a great cost. "I'm afraid it may have set us back further than any of us anticipated," Eridor said. "Even so, we will continue to undermine the king and his rule." "As we should," Emil said. "Gwen and I are going to Steepcross. She wants to know her true name." Eridor frowned. "I assumed she would, but not so quickly. Are you sure this is what you want to do?" "It's not about what I want to do. It's about what I need to do," Gwen replied. "Very well. No one will stop you, of course. You are free to do as you wish, but I would ask a favor of you." "What is it?" "I need a message delivered to a friend in Olivelle. I don't trust anyone else to do it, and magical means are not the best option right now. Who am I taking it to? Her name is Lyra, and she is an ally of the rebellion. She's trying to drum up support within the court of Audible, but it's not easy. Audible's king, Philael, wants nothing to do with our struggles. He's a coward, Emil said. That remains to be seen, Isidore replied. There are rumors that Torian wants to expand his kingdom. If it comes to war, Philael will have no other option but to fight. Lyra is trying to convince him of that. This letter will help her argument. Isidore handed Gwen a scroll case. She took it and held on to it tightly. I'll deliver it to her as soon as I'm done in Steep Cross. Thank you. I know you must have a lot on your mind, and I admire your tenacity to continue onward through the pain and the grief. Gwen offered a nod. Let's get on with it then, Emil said. We'll see you when we return, old friend. Isidore smiled and escorted them out of the tower. Emil led Gwen back to the stable they had boarded their horses at and retrieved them, then went to the market to get supplies. Emil purchased everything they needed, then they left Penshaw behind, traveling east towards Steep Cross. Everything Gwen knew had been only a half-truth. There were so many uncertainties ahead, but Gwen was ready to face them. She was finally going to learn who she really was.
Chapter 20. Connell. Guards! The king roared, leaning forward and thrusting a finger at Connell and the others. Throw them in the dungeon. Connell was the first to react, whirling around and yanking the sword out from Bagran's scabbard. Briac and Drewston followed suit, using their staffs to whack the nearby guards so hard as to knock them sprawling on the floor. Startled, Havard tried to regain control, using the most persuasive voice until he saw Connell advancing towards him. You will put your sword down. Put down your sword. Fear exploded in his eyes when Connell failed to respond to his commands. Backpedaling away from the king, he shouted, Kill them! Before spinning around and racing away. But Connell intercepted him before he reached the door, spreading himself across the doorway. Shocked at the man's speed, Havard jerked his arms out to his front, his hands as though reaching for Connell's throat, as he voiced an incantation. You cannot breathe. Your throat tightens. You are choking. Impervious to his conjuring, Connell raised his sword, causing Havard to flinch, only to have his stroke blocked by Torgrith, who had somehow managed to find a sword of his own. What are you doing? Connell flared, suddenly defending himself against Torgrith's attack. That's right, Havard cried out. You must protect me. Kill him. Protect Havard. Kill him, Torgrith intoned, pressing the attack. While Connell deftly avoided Torgrith's blows, a panicked Havard sped back to the king, a terrible foreboding pulsing within that he was losing control. The druids, doing their best to avoid killing or maiming the guards, had managed to corral them into a far corner. Get more guards, Havard shouted when the doors opened and Voldor marched in, surrounded by the other half of Bagran's troop. Immediately understanding the discord, Voldor broke free and made a beeline towards Torgrith, only to be slowed down when Havard intervened. Kill the intruders. Protect me. Voldor jerked to a stop, confusion clouding his senses. Seeing Voldor stop, Connell knew the reason. Don't listen to him, Voldor, he cried, parrying Torgrith's attack. But it was too late, as Havard's power swept through the door, and he looked around for a sword as the remaining guard members attacked the two druids. We need to get out of here, sire, Havard urged, grabbing the aging king's arm. What's going on? He growled as though suddenly aware of the fray. Assassin, sire, Havard pressed, tugging the king's arm. We gotta go. What? Rorken thundered. You think me, coward, that I cannot defend myself? It was then he saw Voldor reaching for his sword. What are you doing? Get away from my sword. Must protect Havard, Voldor chanted, wrapping his fingers around the hilt. Damn it, you, Rorken barked. Let go of my sword. He grabbed Voldor's hand. Refusing to let go, Voldor and Rorken struggled over the sword, both trying to pry each other's hands from the grip. Havard frantically scanned the room. His hopes rose as he saw the guards swarming around the two tall men. Over by the door, the younger man was fending off Torgrith and two guards. Standing to full height, he held his arms up and spoke in the most enticing voice he could muster. Listen to me. Stop. Put down your weapons. The effect was instant, and the dwarves immediately dropped their swords to their sides. The two druids' staffs held at the ready likewise paused, warily regarding the dwarves surrounding them. His confidence returning, Havard cast a haughty glare at the druids when out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. His head jerked to the right to see the young man leaping towards him, sword raised. So surprised at the sudden lull, Connell reacted with speed, his body moving without thinking as he slipped past Torgrith and the two guards. He was upon Havard before the man had a chance to defend himself. The last thing Connell saw was the abject terror in the man's eyes as his arms moved up to block the blow. In a blinding swift arc, Connell's blade swung down with such a force it sliced through the man's neck. The head momentarily wobbled before flipping down to the floor, blood spurting out the neck as the body crumbled to the ground. It wasn't until he stood over the decapitated body that the enormity of his act burst within, for he had finally killed a man. The first impulse was to retch. It wasn't that he had seen men killed before. It's just that someone else was always responsible. Fighting back the taste of bile, he flicked his head around to see the startled dwarves' faces when a faint burst of reddish light filled the room for an instant, then vanished. The king was the first to speak. "What goes on here?" His thick brow was furrowed into a deep V. He stared down at the headless body of his former confidant and the pool of blood creeping around his still warm flesh. He blinked in lucid understanding. He snapped his head up to give Connell a hard stare. "Did you do this?" Realizing the king had spoken, Connell stood to full height and pulled the cotton out of his ears. "Sire?" "I said, you do this?" "Yes, sire." Rorken's attention abruptly shifted to the gloom of the room. "Why is it so dark in here?" "That's the way he wanted it, sire," Bagran replied, flicking his hand at a guard to light more sconces. As the room filled with light, the king returned his focus to Connell, then the two druids. "Who are you?" "I am Connell, sir." "Sire?" He respectfully bowed. "Why did you kill him?" "He was evil, sire." Rorken's face scrunched as he struggled to remember snippets of the past year gleaning clarity. "Why was he evil?" "He had the magic of the rune tongue, King Rorken," Breck answered. Rorken shifted his gaze to discover who spoke, seeing Boulder and Torgrith standing to the side. "You two! You ran away from here." "Yes, sire," Boulder boldly replied, stepping forward. "We ran because no one would do anything about him." He jabbed a finger at the crumpled corpse. Seeing the king returning to himself again, Boulder unbridled his tongue. "He had power over you. You did everything he wanted you to do. The kingdom is falling apart, and all you do is sit on the throne and let Havard rule. He was destroying everything. Instead of mining and building like any respectable dwarf would do, he had us carving runes into bones." As his memory crystallized, Rorken twisted his head to level and stared at the true druids. "Who are you?" "I am Drustin, sire," he bowed, "and this is my brother Briok. We are half-druids." Seeing Rorken stiffen, he hastily added, "We are not here to harm you, sire. In fact, we are here to seek your help." "Help?" Rorken placed a hand on his chin and twisted his head, cracking his neck before staring at Bagran. "Give me something to drink. An ale." "Yes, sire," he replied before pointing a finger at a guard. "Get the king an ale." "Where are all your servants, sire?" Breck asked, noting the absence of anyone except guards. "Don't need servants," he gruffly answered. "At least, I don't think I do. Do I?" The last was directed at Bagran. "No, sire. We're dwarves, remember? We don't have servants." "Of course I remember," he growled. "I'm a dwarf, damn it." His attention snapped back to Drustin. "Help with what?" Wonder if Havard's spell still lingered in the old man. Drustin explained, "Your advisor was a servant of Grimar, the Magebreaker, advisor to the king of Isentol." "Dorian," he barked. "That man has the gall to send someone to infiltrate my court." He pushed himself to standing, wobbling a bit before demanding, "Where's my ale?" The door burst open, and a guard returned with a pitcher of ale and an artfully carved pewter stein. "It's coming, sire." With the help of another guard, he filled the stein and handed it to Bagran, who handed it to the king. Rorken downed the entire contents in 4 swallows, smacking his lips. "Now I can think. All right, Druid, speak. What is it you want?" "Torian gains power, even as we speak. His army grows as does the strength of his magical arts." "He's a magician. A wizard?" Rorken frowned, holding out a stein for a refill. "No, he's gathered wizards and sorcerers and mages to his court. Their numbers grow daily." With each passing minute, Rorken's clarity improved, and he blinked in understanding. "A man has been raiding my northern frontier for the past several months. and I've done nothing about it. He cast a disgusted look at Havard's corpse. Now I understand why. We were racing to get the surrounding kingdoms to join together to stop him, Briok said. Will you join us? Who's we? Already a rebellion occurs near, in, and around Isentol. Ronan awaits in your north. Ronan, who's he? Rorken sat and leaned forward, forearms on his thighs. He's a friend who owes allegiance to no man or dwarf. Or elf, Briok agreed. He comes when he's needed, and right now he knows he's needed. He has an army? Rorken leaned back and scratched his cheek. The army is small, but elite. Rorken paused to think. That's it? That's all you got? Sire, Druce impatiently explained. We don't know who else has agreed. Like us, our friends have spread throughout the kingdoms, gathering sport. We don't know who else has agreed. But we do know, Briok interrupted, that if nothing is done, this kingdom will fall to Torian, just like all the others. Rorken pursed his lips, his head bobbing in a slow nod. Connell caught his attention again. Who are you? Connell sucked in a slow breath of irritation, repeated, I am Connell, sire. Are you a druid? No, sire. His stare narrowed when he saw the rune markings on Connell's arm. And who and what are you? Deciding to keep his newly discovered heritage to himself for the moment, Connell opened his shirt and pulled it back to reveal the tattoo. I'm a cobra. Rorken, jerked back by the other dwarves, stutter steps out away in fear. Assassin! Rorken gripped the arms of the throne chair. Yes, Connell strutted to stand before the king. But have no great fear, great king. My quest is to restore the kingdom of Isentol to the house of Cameron. Though flattered to be called great king, Rorken cocked his head to the side. Thought the house of Cameron died when he did. It is rumored his children still live, Briok said, shooting Connell an irritated look. We're wasting precious time, Drusen interrupted. We need an answer. Will you help or not? Forgive my impetuous brother, sire, Briok smoothly said, cocking an eyebrow at Drusen. Yet he does have a point. Time is critical. Let me think about it, Rorken hesitated. Before Briok could entreat him further, Drusen said, You have a bone room? A what? Yes, Bagran answered for him, stepping up. Havard had us carve runes into all sorts of bones, then kept them in a room that only he had the key for. Torgoth bent down and patted Havard's headless body, eventually turning him over. Here it is. He lifted the key attached to the chain around his neck, wiping the blood off Havard's robe. Where's this room? Drusen asked. We know where it is, Boldar answered. Sire, Briok's voice rose in volume. The rune bones are dangerous. They need to be destroyed. But not just by anyone, Drusen joined in. You mispronounced the rune and you're dead, Connell added. One can only imagine what Havard had in mind when he had these made. Connell hadn't a clue what he was talking about, but he figured if he sounded ominous enough, he'd be helping the two druids. Well, what do you suggest we do with them? Rorken asked, assuming a regal air. With your permission, sire, Briok replied, we'll take them with us, away from the kingdom. Why? Rorken said, suddenly suspicious. We have mages and wizards here in Gurum-Dur. Perhaps they ought to look at them first. If you so wish, sire. But remember, Havard was Grimmer's man. Grimmer pretends to hate magic when in fact he merely is eliminating the competition, keeping those loyal only to him. Do you trust all your wizards and mages, sire? Connell asked. Be a pity if one or more turned on you and you'd be right back where you were with Havard. Rorken snarled at the thought. Fine, do what you want with them. Just get them out of here. Thank you, sire, Briok bowed. Will you fight with us? Drusen challenged. Rorken scrunched his face and stared at Bagran. Where are all my generals? Spread throughout the kingdom, sire, far away from here, Bagran boldly answered. Havard didn't want anyone around who might sway his control over you, so I had you order them to patrol the kingdom. Who's in command around here? Bagran thought for a moment. I guess I am, sire. What rank do you hold? I'm a sergeant, sire. A sergeant? Rorken sputtered. That fool entrusted my safety to a mere sergeant? That's irresponsible. I can't allow that. You're promoted to captain. Find someone to replace you. Bagrat's initial annoyance at the mere sergeant comment morphed to surprise at the sudden promotion to captain, skipping over lieutenant. Yes, sire. What's your recommendation, Captain? Bagrat closed his mouth and rapidly thought about the past year before saying, go for it, sire. Be the first one to join, if that's the case. Let no one say a dwarf wasn't at the front, leading the way. Well spoken, Captain. Rorken turned to Briac. You have my answer. Thank you, sire. The bone room, Drewston urged. Go, Rorken said, flipped a hand at them, shooing him away. You go with him, Captain Bagran. Yes, sire. Boulder led the way to the room close by, adjacent to Havard's quarters, inserting the key into the padlock and opening the door. The room was the size of a large walk-in closet, filled with crates of rune bones stacked on top of each other. Breck and Drewston shared an apprehensive glance, then walked in. Selecting a bone from an open crate, Drewston was the first to react. I hope we're not too late. He flipped it over to show Briac, then flung the bone back in the box. Briac selected another bone and turned it for Drewston to see. The half druid's head shot up to gape at his brother. This does not bode well. What? Connell asked, not sure what he wanted to hear. Ignoring him, Drewston turned to Bagran. How often did Havard send the bones north? Bagran swallowed hard. Every couple of weeks, protected by dwarves until they got to the border. Then the man guards took over. We haven't sent a shipment since Voldar and Torgrith took off. How long is that? About a month, Voldar answered. Brack studied the number of boxes in the room. Looks like he was keeping back quite a bit. Why? What's on the bones? Connell demanded. Incantations, Drewston replied. I know that, Colonel Hupp. What kind of incantations? Instead of answering, Drewston turned to Bagran, desperation in his voice. We need to get these out of here now. We need a wagon. We also need all these crates nailed shut. As Bagran whirled around to issue orders, Drewston leaned in towards Briac. We need to split up. I'll take the bones back to our place. You and Connell head back to Tir Monarch. Why? Connell interrupted. Because King Calder needs persuasion, and you're the man to do it. Me? Why? Connell squeaked. Why do you listen to me? Because Lord Farrell is favorably inclined towards you, Briac answered. Yeah, but he's not king. He's close enough, Drewston firmly stated. Briac would go with you to protect you. How about a dwarf? Torgrith interrupted, causing the three men to twist their heads to frown at him. What I mean is that I can help persuade King Calder. Tell him that Rorken is already assembling dwarf armies. Drewston nodded. Good idea. Addressing Briac, he said, once I get the bones to safety, I'll head up north to connect with Ronan. Meet me there. Connell listened as Drewston gave further instructions. A thought popped in his head. Wonder if he might bump into Oscan. Wouldn't that be sweet? I'd teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Wake up, Connell, Briac chastised. We need to go, and you need to forget about Oscan. Connell's eyes popped wide. How'd you know I was thinking what I was thinking? I'm a half druid, remember? Briac answered with a smile. Besides, we don't have time to deal with little fish. Little fish? Connell scrunched a face in confusion. Didn't you know? Know what? About Oscan. What about him? Briac studied for a moment, realizing Connell had no clue. Oscan is Calder's man, reporting back to him about what's going on in the kingdom. You mean? Connell's jaw dropped. Briac chuckled. Yes. The entire time you thought yourself a highwayman, you've been working for the king. Letting Connell stew only for a moment, he added, but Oscan serves two masters. All the reports he sent back were conveniently intercepted by another whose master lives in Havengard. Connell's jaw tightened. He'd been played the fool more than once. It was time to become the cobra he was destined to be. End of book 1.
Yep, the end. All right, that wraps it up, but we'll be doing book 2 and 3 as well. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you can get the notifications when we put up new videos, and we'll be doing those weekly as well. So get ready. Stories, more stories coming. All right, see you guys.